I'd like to welcome Geoff and Joe from AXEMASTER to the Ripper Radio podcast for this evening. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man. What's up with you?
Rocking on as always.
Always the best thing to do.
I'd like to start off with maybe a history of the band, like where you guys got your start, and a little bit, that way people can understand you guys a little bit.
Well, I started the band way back in '85. It was really just a band at first to play my original stuff, and it turned into being a lot more than I thought that it would end up being. We did a demo, and from that demo we got signed to Azra International Records out of LA. Did an album, full-length album, and a picture disc with them. Did a couple other releases that were done by some smaller places in Europe. And then the band actually we changed our name and musical direction, which was one of the stupidest things I ever allowed to have happen in my life. I was bitched about doing it for over a year, and finally I said, screw it, everybody, wanted to do this, I'll try it, and that wasn't a good idea. But anyway,
there are still some good songs out of that time period.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't AXEMASTER. It was called Awakening.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put down the stuff we did, because we actually did do some pretty cool stuff. It's just a matter that, we had a name and reputation worldwide as AXEMASTER. And to change it, and part of that had something to do with the fact that metal was going down so bad, especially in the States, and around '94, and the grunge movement was snuffing out the popularity of metal in the U.S. And the guys in the band wanted to play cover songs, and they wanted to play stuff that was more commercial so that we could try and get gigs. They got to the point to where it was damn near impossible for an original metal band to get gigs around here. And so that's where that went. But during the time that the band wasn't active, two different indie labels from Greece re-released pretty much all the stuff that had ever been released by AXEMASTER on 3 different CDs. They kept the name alive and got, people knew who we were a lot better because of that. And then in 2010, I brought the band back totally to stay and put this lineup together, which is just absolutely killer. And it's best lineup by far I've ever worked with in any project I've ever been in. And we're gonna take this as far as it'll go. I'm gonna either be dead or not be able to move my fingers before I give up on this project now.
That's cool.
Yeah. Joe started recording the new album in 2010ish because he got a big. This is Geoff, by the way. He got a big kind of. Recognition is not the kind of word, but a lot of people started sending him notes because 2007 saw the re-release of Blessing in the Skies, which was the first LP, and so he started putting it back together all in 2010, and the lineup as it is now was not as was when he restarted it, and I joined in 2012, was it, I think? End of 2012?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, and Jim, our bass player, was already in it, but it wasn't a gigging deal. And the original drummer Brian Henderson was recording on that as well. But as it stands now, it's me and vocals, and Joe and Jim and Denny, our drummer. And this has been a real good lineup, and I think for the most part, I think it's going to stick around pretty much as is, as far as we can see.
Yeah, there's no drama here. There's no bullshit. There's no fighting. People caring about egos. we're all great friends. We're brothers, and all anybody cares about is that we make the music sound as good as it can, and nobody is out for their own personal glory or ego, which is really damn refreshing to find. A number of people who are like that. So I consider myself really fortunate to be able to work with these guys.
Yeah, that's a hard commodity really to find in music today. Most people have their own little thing they want to do, and they don't want to truly work with each other and just create something cool. You know?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It doesn't matter what the genre of music is. Well, let's be honest. People who are creative either tend to have an interest in what they want to do, or they're just really hard to get along with. There are some very nice people out there, but for the most part, the majority of folks you run into, they kind of, we're all a bit weird. I mean, we might be really nice, but but there's a lot of people out there who take it a little too far and can't let go of what they want to do in order to be able to compromise. So yeah, you're right. It's kind of hard to run across.
It all comes down to that, and I mean, everything just goes smoothly. You know, if I come up with an idea and the other guys don't dig it, that's cool. If they want to change an idea that I had, if I like what they're doing, and everybody is free to be honest and open, and nobody's an asshole about it. Everybody's cool about it. If they want to change something or not do something, it's, nobody has an issue with it.
Yeah, it's really nice to be able to just say, and in other bands, I've always been the blunt one to be able to go, no, I really don't like that. I don't think it sounds right. But it's nice to be able to be blunt in this band and nobody cares.
Yeah, everybody's secure in who they are and what they do. Everybody's a music veteran, and we don't take it personally. It's business.
Yeah, and if everybody else really likes it and I'm the one outstanding, then, I can let it drop. So same goes for everybody else as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Since you guys have been around, well, especially Joe, for the last 25 years, how would you say the music industry has really changed over the years as far as metal goes?
Well, the obvious thing is, the advent of the internet. That's changed the whole ballgame from the 80s and before. I mean, the obvious difference in all kinds of music is, you used to put out a vinyl album, and that's where your income came from. When you toured, it was almost like promoting the album. Now it's just the reverse. You put out an album so that people can dig what you're doing and want to come see you on tour, and you get the main amount of income a band gets is from playing live and selling merchandise.
Yeah, metal was also more, back in the 80s and 70s when, we were all, fresh-faced and going, wow, this is great stuff, and it was all new. There was also a, it wasn't as accepted. After a while, hey, I'm getting a double feed here. Maybe somebody's speaker's too loud. But after a while, I noticed that, especially now, nobody really looks at you and says, "Oh my God, you're into heavy metal." They don't make the assumptions that they used to. All of it's still there. I mean, there are folks who will never really understand, but the general view of heavy music is not nearly as snobbish as it used to be. It's become mainstream so much because, well, thanks to Metallica and a few other bands. There's a huge, much more accepting, larger group of people that might not be their thing, but they don't automatically assume that you're eating babies for lunch.
Well, and the thing is, too, back in the 80s, music like Metallica was considered pretty extremely heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, now it's not.
No.
With all the hardcore, screamo, the different genres like that, the music, the way we do it, that we play, is not considered anywhere near the heaviest kind of metal there is.
No, but the general populace doesn't really think about that kind of. Yeah, the general populace doesn't think about extreme metal when they think about heavy metal either. They're not really thinking about that. But so there's more of an acceptance too. So that's been a change as well.
Yeah, and you got to figure too. A lot of the people that were the quote rebels that were into punk and metal in the late '70s, early '80s, are in their 50s now.
Yeah.
50s and 60s, so the world has changed. Not just music, the whole world has changed and everything in it, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems like the record labels, they just kind of put your albums out now, and they don't really back you guys like they used to do. And
well, record labels are broke.
Record labels never really back people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be honest about it, the only bands that genuinely got backed, a record label in the 80s and early 90s released about 2,000 albums a year. That's 2,000 albums in a year. And how many of those bands did you actually hear about? You heard about a handful, maybe 10. And that's because there was something about those bands that they thought the larger population would buy. So they paid to back those, and they didn't pay to back the other ones. And some of those other ones broke out and became huge anyway. But to be perfectly honest, most bands never really got any backing. And on top of that, the labels also figured out how to claim recoupables.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. A lot of these things were just, average fans. They think, oh, this record label was, bought them the ability to make this video or do this or do that. It wasn't that they were giving them that money. They were giving them a loan, basically.
Yeah, you had to pay that back, and you still do. And I'm actually far more happy with how the smaller labels work today. I mean, the larger the label you get, like CBS and Warner and all those guys, still operate on the same concept as they always have. But the new labels that cater to metal and things like that, I won't get into details, but we didn't get a loan from Pure Steel Records at all. Pure Steel Records put out our album.
They paid to have it pressed.
They paid to have it pressed. All the expenses for that came out of their pocket. There's nothing that they're charging back to us. And then they did what they could as far as promotion and pushing our album. We were a priority for them for a few months. So, I prefer that much more than the idea of walking into a place and knowing that, hey, the label is giving us $25,000 to do the recording and tour, and we need to make enough money back in order to pay that back.
Yeah, I know of this band back in the 80s. They were a glam metal band, and they got signed to a subsidiary of Atlantic, and they were under this impression, it almost seemed like that they were getting this stuff for free, and they went and they had the studio catered, and they took their time and all this crap, and they wound up with a bill, a whopping bill over $50,000. Well, their album only sold 30,000 units, which at that time, it was not that much for a major label, and the label dropped them. Boom, the band owed the label $50,000.
Yeah, and that's before that money has to be paid back before any royalties. And, you know, Steve Vai got a huge deal on Flexible. He got a label to distribute his album, and he paid for everything, which means that he got $7 on the album, which was an unheard of amount for any record label, any record to get per sale. You know, you get on a major label, you get pennies per album, and if you owe money, then the recoupables, which are quote-unquote recoupables, those get paid back out of all your sales, and you don't get a royalty check until that's paid back.
And you got to remember that back in the 80s, a lot of these, if you didn't sell 100,000 units, you were about done. Now, if you're selling 20, 30,000 units, you're doing good.
Yep.
Because record sales have just gone down so much since the internet, downloading all that shit. You know, the people aren't going out and buying physical CDs like they did albums back in the day.
Yeah, I've always had a rule that if I really was into a band, I still buy their CD. I don't do a download because I know that pennies on the dollar for every little snippet of a song, you know, nobody's really making any money that way, so I always make sure I buy a CD of somebody I really care about. You know,
yeah, and if more people did that, you know, the whole business would be in so much better shape.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I will speak for all the bands. We appreciate when you do that, especially if you buy directly from the band these days. You know, there are those guys out there that say they have rationalized not buying an album because they think that the record label gets the money and the artist doesn't receive anything out of it. But, you know, those guys, if they really thought that, they could buy the album directly from the artist.
Yeah.
There are very few artists out there who don't have some of their own product. And those who don't are so big that they're not going to respond anyway.
Yeah.
But,
you write Metallica and ask them to buy Kill 'Em All, I don't think you're going to receive a reply.
No, but the majority of bands out there, because like I said earlier, a record label back in the 80s or 90s released approximately 2,000 albums a year. How many of those bands or artists or comedians were actually still out there touting their own album? Because, you know, out of the 10 folks that label pushed hard all year, REO Speedwagon or Boston or whomever, how many other bands were still, putting their own album out and on their tables and on their, well, not the websites at the time, but on their merch tables or through mail order. They were doing it themselves. So there's always a way to get that album without actually, buying it from the label if that's what you object to. But,
yeah, I actually heard of labels back then that actually would sign a band as a tax write-off. That it would be a business expense, and they wouldn't put anything into them.
Yep.
Yeah, the 10, it came out as a tax write-off, but out of those 10 bands that they pushed all year, so that leaves them with 1,990 albums out there that they didn't push. Those 10 make up the shortfall on the others. Yeah, that's the business model for those large labels.
A lot of people don't realize that. They think if you sign with a large label that they're going to give you all kinds of perks and different things, and that you've got it made. And they don't really know what really goes on.
There's a handful of books out there if you're really interested in it that are fantastic reads that get into that. But we've probably driven that into the ground at this point.
Yeah. You got it there, bro.
I also noticed you guys have been featured in a few independent movies as far as the music goes.
Yeah, a couple. One of them, the most recent one, was very small indie thing that I don't know if it was ever even put out on DVD. I know that it was taken to film festivals and things like that. But the first one that we did was a movie called, it was actually direct to video that you could get at, video stores and things like that, which was pretty kick-ass to see your name in the credits at the end of a movie.
That's cool. So you guys are close to heading back into the studio soon. What can we expect from your next album?
This one's a bit more eclectic than the last one. The last one was pretty universal sound throughout the songs. There were some differences, of course. I mean, you can't have everything sound exactly the same, but
same style, same feel.
Same style, same feel for the most part on the last album. This one is a little more eclectic. There's a couple very traditional metal tunes. There's some real thrashy stuff. There's some very technical stuff too. It's a little bit of everything, and it's kind of hard to really nail down, but there's something for everybody on this one, I think.
Well, this see the Overture to Madness, I wrote all the music for it. Period. By myself. I even wrote a lot of the drum parts. Things that I created a lot of the drum parts. And the album, other than vocals and lyrics and that, which was all Geoff. Other than that, the album was just me. I mean, I really got very, very few suggestions about, hey, why don't you try this here? Maybe 2 or 3 on the whole album. The whole rest of the album was just me in my studio creating stuff. And I rearranged a few things for Geoff's vocals and that type of thing, but that was really it. Now, this new album, we're doing it totally as a group effort. Everybody's involved in all areas of the writing. So you're going to see, subtle differences because of that, but don't think that we strayed from the same thing that we did on Overture to Madness, because we're still the same style band. But it's got more variety. It might be a little bit more interesting as a whole because of that.
Yeah, it's not like we changed our sound or altered our outlook on music. It's more of an amorphous concept than that. It's still AXEMASTER, but there's play. There's a little play in it. Some of the stuff, I mean, on Overture to Madness, lyrically and soundly, and how it sounded, everything was very heavy and dark, and oh my God! And while the new one, while the new one is still dark, there's a little bit of fun in there.
Well, it's in that one tune. It's really in that one tune. But you're getting a lot more variety of influences, when you're talking about, Denny added some ideas, you added ideas, Jim added ideas. So, you're getting more different perspective of things than just me.
Right. There's even one song on here that 90% of it I put together, and then we fleshed it out in rehearsals, and I'm very proud of that one. There's a lot on this album from everybody's input.
Be honest, once this album comes out, I think I'm going to be the most proud of the writing of this album than of anything I've ever been a part of. Because I with the help of everybody else, what we usually do, I usually come up with the majority of the riffs, and then we take it from there. And I mean, if I do say so myself, I think that I've been able to come up with probably the best stuff I ever did in my life.
And when everything clicks, everything, kind of flows, and then it makes the music better that way. When I used to play, we used to just do jam sessions, and then songs kind of created out of those jam sessions every time. So I can understand where you guys are coming from for as far as influence.
Yeah, usually what happens is I come up either with a riff or like a sample song with just a demo arrangement, bring it to everybody. If everybody digs it, we start working on it, and we change what people think need to be changed, and we keep what they like, But it usually starts off with me writing either a few riffs or a sample song, demo song. And then we tear it apart and turn it into Dr. Frankenstein.
So what would you guys say your biggest musical influences are?
Well, we know yours, Geoff.
Yeah, well, Joe and I have one in common, and that's Tony Iommi. I guess I technically have four. Two that I think are fantastic. There are a lot more than that, of course, but I quote four. Two for guitar and two for vocals. Tony Iommi of the great Black Sabbath, and Scott Ian of Anthrax and MOD and SOD and lots of places. Scott he's just fun to watch and is a solid rhythm guitarist. And Tony, of course, is legendary, is the way he does his sound and his feel. Lyrically and vocally, the two guys that I think are possibly the best lyricists and vocalists ever are Ronnie James Dio and Warrell Dane. I don't have the range of either one of those guys. Well, I might be able to match Warrell these days because he doesn't have the range he used to. But I really love how those guys phrased their words and put the way they sang over music instead of with it. Kiss, they always sang with the tune. You knew the chord was going to be a word, and the note was going to be the chord, and you sang with it. And I was never a huge fan of that. Although
you get into that a lot when a guitar player writes lyrics.
Right. And I always like the way those two guys especially sing over a song. I like their phrasing, and I like the way they put things together and the way they think. So those four are my biggies.
Yeah, I look at bands, for my writing style. I look at bands more than I look at individual artists. I have individual guitar players that influence me, there's a bunch of them, guys like, Tony, and then Michael Schenker, especially the early stuff Kirk Hammett did, some George Lynch, stuff like that. But as far as writing and feel goes, I like to, I mention a whole band rather than, one individual person. And I'd say that most of my writing comes out to be a combo of thrash and doom metal. You got the Black Sabbath, the doomy, maybe even some Candlemass, and then you've got like the early Metallica, some Slayer, stuff like that. You throw those two together, combine it with some Iron Maiden and early Sabotage, and that pretty much sums up my style of writing.
I can definitely see some of those influences from the stuff I've played so far on the show.
It's like if you took the stuff that Tony Iommi would write and then make it into thrashy, crunchy rhythms instead of just straightforward stuff. I do that a lot.
Cool.
Gotta be dark, though. It's gotta be dark. If it ain't dark, I throw it out. Except for that one song. Because these guys loved it, so I said, all right, well, what the hell?
Doesn't hurt to be diverse. Any upcoming shows or touring coming soon?
We have something that is coming up with the band that we're not really at liberty to talk about yet because we haven't officially announced it, and we want to do that in a very big way. But we've been waiting to schedule shows until everything was put together with that, and it's very close now. So, we haven't played a show in a while because of that. But we'll be doing that soon. And we just signed with a management company out of Las Vegas, and that was just within the last couple of weeks. So we're hoping that, the tour possibilities and the bigger show possibilities will be a lot more within our reach now that, we have a professional official representation.
Yeah, often one of our big problems has been often bands or promoters and won't necessarily talk to a band. They think that if you don't have management, that that you're not with it and together. So often they won't even talk to a band if you don't currently have management.
And they won't care how much experience you have in the business. I mean, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years, but that doesn't matter.
Right. So we're hopefully opening some more doors here with that.
Cool. Anything you'd like to say to your fans out there before we wrap this up?
You go.
I wasn't really prepared for that. The fans of metal are so cool. I just went and hung out at Spring Bash in Wisconsin last weekend and had an absolute blast. They're so welcoming, and it's so...
And look at you as a friend, you just haven't met yet.
Yeah, right. Anybody out there, if you come to a show, come say hi to us. Nobody's gonna be like, don't talk to me or anything like that. Come say hi to us, look us up on Facebook, send us messages. We might not get back to you that second, but we will. I'm always down to talk to fans. I'm a fan myself. I'm as big a goofball about music as anybody out there. Call us, check us out. Not call us. I guess you don't really have our phone number, but send us a message on Facebook. Send us a message on Facebook, or stop by our website and send us an email. Say hello. If you catch us at a show, don't feel that you can't come back and to the merch table and sit and talk with us, because that's cool too. Always down with meeting other metal people. It's always a good thing. Horns up, and stop by our website and say hi.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about being in a band like AXEMASTER is that I love meeting new people, and I love getting the opportunity to meet fans from all over the world. I mean, that is one of the most kick-ass things about being in a band like this. I don't get musicians who think or act like that they're better than their fans. I mean, they're missing the point. We're all metal fans are a big family. And there's nobody better than anybody else. And I love talking to people, and I'm honored that people would want my autograph or want pictures taken with me or something. It's not a pain in the butt. To me, it's an honor. Check out our website at AXEMASTERofficial.com. We're all over the damn internet. You don't have to do much to find us. We're everywhere.
There's only one
make that happen. I work my ass off to make that happen, and definitely be looking for new material. It ain't gonna be for a little while yet. We haven't even started recording, so it'll be a little while, but you can rest assured there's going to be more AXEMASTER albums, more AXEMASTER shows, and this band we are in this for the long haul. This is not just a one-trick pony. We're in this to kick some international ass for years to come.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the show tonight. I hope to have you guys on again, probably around when you guys put out your new album. I'll have you guys back on to talk about it.
It's our pleasure, Brian.
Yeah, man, it's always great to do.
Cool. Alrighty, well, until next time, horns up.
Horns up, brothers.
Bye-bye. Glad you could stop by. Here, have some candy.